Okay.
All right, there you go.
Are we going? Okay. I am interviewing Dr. Gilman and Mr. Larry Gilman and about the Ashland history of 100 years. Thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Gilman.
Oh, it's a pleasure to help you.
Happy to be here.
First off, how long have you both been in Ashland?
I was born here, and I lived away just for 18 months or so.
I was born here, and I've been away college for 4 years and away for about 3.5. Other than that, I've been here.
Wow, that's impressive. So do you have relatives that still live in Ashland, either one of you?
Yes, my mother lives next door. My son lives about 15 minutes away. I have a sister who sometimes lives here, and I have some nieces and a nephew in the county.
My mother lives here.
Wow, that's pretty awesome. Long chain of family living nearby. So did you attend any schools nearby, like either in Hanover or Ashland itself?
Yes, we were in first grade together. That's when we first met. My mother was the room mother, and I went home and told her that there was the cutest little boy in my class. And she said, looking back on that, little did she know he would be her son-in-law, but she thought he was pretty cute too.
It used to be Henry Clay Elementary School. It used to be all 11 grades right here in Ashland. We went through the 7th grade here. No, we went through the 8th grade here, didn't we? We went through the 8th grade here in Ashland, and then we went to Patrick Henry, which was a new school right outside of Ashland.
Okay. So how did you attend RMC, or did you go to a different college outside the state or outside the county?
I went to Longwood University because I knew I always wanted to be a teacher, and that was, known for a good teacher school.
And I went to Virginia Tech.
Did you ever go to the movie theater on Henry Street or before it closed, or no?
The one on England Street?
Yeah.
Yes,
England
the,
Street, sorry.
the one on England Street. Lots of times. There was usually a Saturday matinee, and it was a fully functioning theater when we were growing up here.
Yeah, she covered it. I remember it used to cost $0.25 when I was a kid. Lots of times.
Okay, so how was the neighborhood that you grew up in? What was it like?
I grew up in the country. I grew up between Ashland and Hanover Courthouse, even though my address was Ashland. And we kind of had a little mini farm, so I was really not in town. Didn't have a whole lot of close neighbors, but I had a good friend who lived probably a half-mile away.
I grew up right in town, and it was pretty similar to what it is now on the west side of Route 1. All that other on the east side has developed over the years. Of course, Route 95 was not there then either. So it was a nice little town. Had a lot more vacant lots in it than it does now, and it was a wonderful place to grow up. Lots of kids around, lots of ball fields and backyards and woods, and so it was terrific.
Would you say the community was close-knit, like where you grew up?
Yes, Ashland was a very close-knit community. Nobody locked their doors, and everybody kind of took care of everybody else's children. We tell our mothers, well, that's not the case for me because I grew up in the country. Maybe it's better for him to talk about growing up in town.
Oh yeah, everybody watched out for everybody else. I'm sure I can't remember specifics, but I know that my neighbors reported on me regularly to my mother about what I was doing in the neighborhood. Everybody knew me. I knew everybody. Like she said, no doors were ever locked, and my mother was not worried about me. Once I got to be, I don't know, a reasonable age, 9 or 10 years old, I just after school was out, she said be home for supper, at whatever time, and she didn't worry about where I was going because she knew I was going to be fine.
That's pretty cool. Do you know anything about like past history with Ashland, like any wars that took place in the United States history? Like any stories about them through your parents or your grandparents or anything like that?
Well, actually, I know that in 1858, Ashland became what it is a town, and I belonged to the Baptist Church, which was just down the railroad tracks here on Center Street. And that's now the Ashland Arts and Activity Center. In fact, we were the last people to be married in that church before our church had outgrown that site and we moved to the facility on Route 54. That church on Center Street was used as a Civil War hospital, and there were, Civil War battles here in Hanover County. And the story is at that church that there were blood-stained floors from the injuries of soldiers. And after the war, they covered that floor with another floor and then carpeted it because nobody wanted to be reminded of that war.
That's in terms of wars here. That's it. I think she's basically covered. A lot of fighting took place, in and around here.
Do you know anything about the original Henry Clay Inn?
I do know that as a child, my father was a ticket agent at the railroad station, which is still here. But then there was also a depot across the street where a lot of baggage and supplies that were going to go by rail were stored. So he really worked mostly on this east side of the tracks. And I never saw the Henry Clay Inn because it burned before I have any recollection of that. In fact, I think it probably burned shortly before we were born or right about the time we were born. But I can remember as a child there were still steps, because the current Henry Clay Inn is not on the original site. Right. But I do remember at the original site there were concrete steps that went up to a long walkway. And over those concrete steps was a really beautiful rose arbor, and they were still climbing blooming roses when I was a child on that site. But now there are no remnants of the original hotel at all.
She covered it. That's my memory.
So,
You're done fine.
so you don't know what the reasons why it burned down or anything like that? No stories, just the fact that.
No, but I do know that a number of people kind of lived in the hotel, like newlyweds. They might live there for 6 months or a year. It was kind of different from how we use hotels, today. In fact, some of our friends' parents, when they were just newlyweds, lived there in the hotel. And I don't recall ever knowing the cause of the fire that destroyed the hotel.
I never heard of the cause either.
Okay. Well, as Ashland now versus back then, however long that was, have you noticed a difference in the community and then the school being nearby with the close-knit community? Is there a difference? Is there opposing forces between the school and the community outside of it?
When you speak of the school, you mean Randolph-Macon? Well, Randolph-Macon obviously has been here as longer than we have. I believe the campus was moved from Boydton to Randolph-Macon after the Civil War. It's very different, now because there's so many more people here in our town. But the college has always had a very nice and a very strong presence, I think, in the community. Anything else with that?
Is there is it a good force? Is there good things coming out of the school being in the town of Ashland?
Well, I think when you are away from Ashland, when you travel somewhere and people ask you, what's your home or where's your home, and you say in Ashland, Virginia, one of the first things they will recognize if they know Randolph-Macon is that's where Randolph-Macon is. So I think there's a good relationship, or I feel like there always has been a good relationship between the town and the college.
I think it's good for Randolph-Macon to be in Ashland because Ashland is in such a great location. right here in central Virginia, near Richmond, near really Washington, Fredericksburg, near the ocean, near the mountains. Route 95 access is wonderful. I mean, so I think it's good for Ranulph-Macon to be in Ashland, and I think it's really good for Ashland for Ranulph-Macon to be here as well, because there's a lot of stuff that goes on over there that the community participates in. I mean, lots of people go to the basketball games and the football games and the other and baseball and all the other things that are going on, plus all the, the arts and all the various activities over there that the community participates in.
Do either one of you participate in the town's government?
No, I don't. I, have attended town council meetings, and I've served on town committees, but I've never sought election for an office in the town.
Yeah, same thing. Committees for the town, and I was a town attorney. I had a law practice here in town, and they were one of my clients. It wasn't like a full-time job, but they were like a part-time client. So I guess I was a part-time attorney is what it amounted to. And I had to go to all the town council meetings, and of course I met with them and all that sort of thing. So I guess you could say I participated in the government, but not as an elected official, just as a paid person.
Do you have any interesting stories about being the lawyer for the town council?
No, I don't think I could think of anything that would be of outstanding interest. Just the normal, questions, zoning and then all those sorts of things, land use and just legal questions of all kinds. I can't think of anything that would be really noteworthy. Maybe I'll think of something. Not right now.
Nothing bizarre.
Nothing bizarre that I can think of.
Okay. Did either one of you have your first job here in Ashland, or was it like out of the city or county?
My first job, I guess my first paying job, other than being a babysitter, was where Ashland Coffee and Tea now was Painter's Department Store. Well, the original Painter's Department Store was across the railroad tracks next door to Cross's grocery store, where Hometown Realty is now. So that was my first paid job. I was a salesperson for Painter's Department Store.
So what did they sell there? Because I don't know anything.
It was, they had a shoe department in the back, and then other than that, it was men's, women's, and children's clothing items.
Okay, and you?
Yeah, well, I worked a lot here. I started cutting grass to make spending money when I was about 12, and I worked at grocery stores here in town. The A&P used to be here, and I worked.
Which they never heard of.
Yeah, I guess that was Atlantic and Pacific, wasn't it? A&P grocery chain.
Tea company.
A&P Tea Company, that's right. And I worked for them, and in summers, and after school and weekends and things like that. And I worked for Painter's Department Store too, believe it or not at the same time you did, Brenda. I don't even know if you remember that or not. But I worked for Painter's. I also did sales and a little bit of everything that Mr. Painter and Mrs. Painter wanted me to do. So yeah, I've had lots of work here in the town.
Do you mind if I ask what your wages were back then?
I don't even remember. Do you remember what?
I don't have any idea. Maybe $3 an hour or something to work at Painter's Department Store. But when I babysat, it was 50 cents an hour. Wow. But it only cost 25 cents to go to the movie theater, too, when we were children.
Yeah. I don't remember the hourly wage like for A&P or Painters either, but I can remember cutting grass. I remember that $2.25 was for a really big yard. $2.25. One that I'm sure would be $75 now to cut.
Oh, I just wanted to say that the movie theater was a wonderful place where you could meet your friends. On Saturday afternoon, there was always a matinee. But often we would go Friday night and sit with our friends. And then we'd go again on Saturday for the matinee. And maybe even Saturday night, depending upon what the movie was. But that was kind of a social gathering for preteens.
So it's kind of like what it is now still.
I suppose, yeah.
Okay, that's pretty interesting. Well, you mentioned something about the church, and so I was wondering if you are very active in the church. Either one of you.
We are members of the church that I grew up in, which was the church on the railroad tracks that served as a Civil War hospital. I think we're pretty active in a church.
Yeah, I know I wasn't raised in that church. I was raised in an independent Christian church outside town. But when I married her, I went ahead and started going to her church, and I've joined a long time ago. And I teach Sunday school there and run a Christian education program for them, the Alpha program, and I've been on a number of committees in various capacities, and she's done a lot over the years for the church, including running Vacation Bible School every summer for a long time, right?
Yeah, but now I'm chair of the 150th Anniversary Committee, the 150th Anniversary of Ashland Committee, so that's kind of fun, and a lot of the things that the town and our church are the same age. So a lot of things that we do, the town is very interested in, and vice versa.
That's very interesting. I didn't even know about that. So other than the movie theater, and what all else did you do for fun in Ashland as you were growing up?
Rode bikes a lot. We rode bicycles everywhere we went. We fished in the ponds outside. There are a lot of ponds around different places we fished. Played a lot of ball, basketball hoops in backyards. Played a lot of basketball at Randolph-Macon. When the gym wasn't in use for the teams or the students, we could play in there. Of course, I've been run out of that gym a number of times too, because students were supposed to be in there and we weren't. But yeah, there was a lot of things to do. I mean, we were always doing things, swimming in local rivers and things. No swimming pools, but
Yeah, we didn't have a
rivers
town.
around.
We didn't have a town pool when we were growing up, so we'd go to the South Anna River, South Anna River, Horseshoe Bridge. So that was quite a social gathering place, and swim there. Since I lived in the country, it was a big deal for me to bring my roller skates and come to town and roller skate on the sidewalks, and that
Did
was
have
often.
sidewalks back then too. That's right, we had some sidewalks, not as many as we do now. But we skated, we roller skated, that's right. We roller skated around off Macon was a good place to go and roller skate because of all their sidewalks. So we roller skated a lot around off Macon.
Yeah, and in front of Blackwell, we did a lot of roller skating. So the Saturday movies, roller skating, and then we had, scouting, brownies and Girl Scouts, and I don't guess we had Little League then. Was there Little League?
Yeah, I think that,
But it was only for boys.
yeah, didn't that for girls.
Did you participate in brownies and Girl Scouts?
I did that. Hmm.
That's cool. Do your families have any stories about the Great Depression when it hit in Ashland?
Actually, my parents were from Hanover County. My father from the eastern end of the county, my mother from the western end of the county. And my mother just talks about, living on a farm and how rural it was, and how she felt so isolated. So when she moved to Ashland, she really thought she was in a wonderful place to have neighbors close by and such. But neither one of my parents really talked much about the Depression. They were fairly young during the Depression, and I'm sure they were at impressionable ages, but at their ages you think that's what life is. You don't know life as being any different.
Yeah, my parents would have been about 9, I think, when the Great Depression hit, and they weren't in Ashland at that time, neither one of them. So I don't really have any stories about it.
Okay. Well, you're a teacher here at Randolph-Macon. Do you enjoy it?
I love being able to be at Randolph-Macon because I've grown up with Randolph-Macon and being in the Randolph-Macon community. I remember before 1972 when it became co-ed. When I was a little girl, all the freshmen at Randolph-Macon wore black and yellow beanies, felt beanies, and so you always knew who the freshmen were. And I can remember looking at those young men thinking, they are so old. And now when I look at freshmen, obviously it's quite a different sense of their age. But I think the college has made Ashland a very nice community to grow up in. In fact, we decided that we would, when we married, that we would stay in the community and raise our children, because it is a good place. You have a sense of belonging and you have a sense of security. And the railroad's always been a part of the town. My father worked for the railroad, so I was very familiar with the railroad. I think Larry has a horror story about the railroad. I think he almost got run over by a train once. But
Oh, please do share.
Oh, scary to me. No big deal. But the trains, a lot of trains came through then, more so than now. And they would, quite frequently, there would be two going in opposite directions, and they would cross together. So, and there's a little side, there used to be a little side walkway crossing, the main Route 54 crossing for cars, and then there was a little, I guess, pedestrian crossing over to the right side of that. So, I don't know, I was just a kid. I was on my bicycle, and I was coming up onto that, when the train went by, the one closest to me. And so I started across without watching the guards or anything. I started to come across. And as the train went by me, the conductor yelled as loud as he could because a train was coming the other way, and I didn't know it. And if that conductor hadn't yelled at me, because he yelled so loud, I heard him over the trains. I heard a yell, and I stopped, and I looked up, and he was, doing all this stuff. And so I stopped, and like, I don't know, 3 or 4 feet away, came the other train from the other direction right by me. So he's yelling, I think, I know it saved my life, because I would have been right in front of that train.
Wow, well, I'm glad you're here with us today.
And there have been cars hit. I've never seen one, but there are a number, not for a long time though, but years ago there were occasionally cars that were hit at the crossings, but I haven't heard of a car being hit for a long
no,
time.
there were a number of people who've lost their lives or been severely injured by train. In fact, there was Randolph-Macon. Young woman, not too many years ago. Well, I've been at the college for 25 years, but I think she lost her arm to a train. And I remember as a child, there was a biology professor who rode his bike all over town, and he was hit by the train, and that was a fatal accident for him. There was a young man not too many years ago when the train had stopped in Ashland, and he was impatient for the train to move on so he could get to the other side, and he crawled under the train to get to the other side, and the train then started, and it amputated his legs. And there's some sad stories of people who, one woman was crossing the tracks with her car, and she was an elderly woman, and she turned too sharp, and she went into the tracks just on the corner, but her car wouldn't move, and a train came by and hit her. But we certainly both remember Ashland not having any crossing arms or anyone there to, forewarn you of a train. So I guess we've been actually pretty lucky, all these years. There have been a few accidents that have been bad, but there haven't been that many.
Well, that's good. Do you know when they put the crossing arms in to prevent injuries?
I think I was a child when those crossing
It was a long time ago,
arms
but I don't know.
came in. And actually, I do remember before they put them in, and we were children, I'm pretty sure, there used to be a train crossing at every street. Do you remember that?
Yeah. It used to be
Every
more
street
crossings.
that intersected with the railroad tracks, there was a crossing. So you didn't have to turn, right or left to get to a crossing. There was just automatically a crossing. But when they put the crossing, arms down and the lights, they took those out because it was too costly to put them at every street. And actually, that wouldn't look very good either, would it? Every little street would have crossing arms. So, gosh, that greatly reduced your access to get across the tracks. But that was a long time ago. I hadn't thought about that.
Well, I'm glad we thought of something. You said your dad worked at the railroad tracks. Does he have any like interesting stories that he passed down to you before you like came around?
Oh, I don't know. I think things were always kind of interesting there because different people, were coming to the station to get the train to go somewhere or to get off here. There were people who had summer homes here, and they would, he would get to know those people. And of course, when there was an accident with the train, that was always, big news and talked about. I think we're a town that has really come to, just love the presence of the train. And I believe right now there's a controversy about rerouting the train so the passenger trains do not come through Ashland. To take I can't remember, there's another link. And there are a number of petitions against that. Because we like having the passenger service. And there were a number of years where we didn't have passenger service. You would have to go to Richmond, to get the train. But now we have passenger service, and we did when I was a child, and then there was a pretty long period of time when they did stop the passenger service, just because it was more economical not to have a station here in Ashland. But really, all we have now is a stop in Ashland. You don't buy your tickets here or anything. But you can do all that, through the internet, so you don't need to have a train station with a train master.
Well, Mr. Gilman, what do you do currently as a job?
I'm the Juvenile and Domestic Relations District Court Judge in Hanover County, the family court.
Wow, so that's really interesting. Do you have like any I'm sure you must have several interesting stories about the domestic disputes.
Well, well, I do, but most all of the proceedings there involving custody of children and all those kinds of things. Most things are confidential or private.
Right.
So, and I don't know. I guess I don't feel comfortable even telling stories about things that go on in the courtroom.
That's okay. I can understand confidentiality.
But we deal with lots of sad things, all the bad things that happen, to families when they're breaking up and so forth. Custody, visitation. We deal with a lot of domestic violence. That's crimes committed by adults against other adult family members, crimes committed by adults against children. That's all your, sexual abuse stuff and all that sort of thing. So, it's not a real, the subject matter is not pleasant, but I do like the job because it's a good, challenging job every day. But beyond that, I guess I shouldn't say anything.
I will tell you, Sasha, that there was a time, and I guess it still is, it just doesn't seem as obvious now. When he first went on the bench, he was just hearing about bad things that were happening. And there for a while we saw ourselves as, I was working with a wonderful population, the college population. There's so much, potential and so much energy and so many good things going on. And he was working, kind of at the other end of the spectrum with people who were just unhappy, not very well adjusted, not very productive, and dealing with a lot of trouble situations. So it was a nice balance that I could say these wonderful things that students at Randolph-Macon were doing, and it kind of counterbalanced.
It did help me.
Gave him hope that the world is not what he sees every day.
Do you get any happy endings to any of your stories or no?
Oh yeah, I think so. Like some of the kids that end up, that I have to place in foster care because, to let the state raise them because there's no family member to do it. Some of them turn out pretty well. They get adopted and it works out real well. And so, I really don't. In most of the cases, I really don't see, like like today, a couple of custody cases, I placed a child, with either the mother or the father, and I don't really get to see the end result of that child. I don't know what happens, and whether that really worked out real well or not. Sometimes they do. They'll come back because they'll have different disputes, and some of them I've made a custody decision when they were infants, and and they keep coming back from time to time, and so I know a little bit of what's going on. But most of the time, I really don't know what happens to the young people. But then there are some success stories. Some of the young people that have had some tough times, like we run a drug court, a juvenile drug court over there, and some of those kids, we've really helped them, beat their addictions and that sort of thing. So yeah, there's some good stories.
And he is being a little modest because he does hear from, these people who've been in his court. And there was a young woman in particular, I remember, she wrote to him for a long time and thanked him for what changes were brought about in her life because of decisions he made, which was very nice.
That is very nice. How long have you been doing this job?
10 years.
And has it gotten progressively worse, or has it gotten better, or has it stayed the same? It's probably the same. If the caseload builds a little bit, that's kind of slowed down a little bit, actually. The numbers of cases is not growing as rapidly as it was, which is a good thing. The only real trend, I guess I could say, that it's really bad for families and for our nation, because this is a nationwide trend, is that people are living together instead of getting married. More and more children are born out of wedlock. I agree. It's a shame. Oh. When you said that you met at elementary school, or first grade or whatever, how did you know that you two were going to end up being together, and when did you two start dating?
Well, I didn't know we would end up together.
I didn't either, but I will tell you, every little girl, I think, in that first grade classroom, and probably up until about third grade, had a big crush on him. They would say, "Oh, he's my boyfriend," and I'd think, "Oh, I wish he were really my boyfriend." No, when we were, I guess it was after our sophomore year in high school, I invited him to what was a Sadie Hawkins, isn't that what it was, a Sadie Hawkins dance? Where girls could ask guys.
Girls can do that now, but back then they couldn't, except for Sadie Hawkins.
And, he was, I guess he was kind of shy. I don't know. Anyway, I invited him to go to this dance. And
10th grade, right?
I think it was after 10th grade, or the end of 10th grade. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so she picked me out in the first grade, and she chased me for the next 10 years, and she finally caught me in the 10th grade.
That's so cute. Have either one of you thought about moving out of Ashland?
Well, we we got married right after graduation from college, and that's what a lot of people did. Most people did that then. Now people are waiting longer to get married. And he had an ROTC commission out of Virginia Tech, and we went to Germany and lived in Germany for a couple years while he was in the Army. And I think we thought about, I think we probably had talked about we probably wouldn't live in Ashland. We'd probably live somewhere else. But I think spending that time away from Ashland, we realized how wonderful Ashland was. What a good place. And by the time we were thinking about having children, it was a good place to raise children. It was a good place to be. So we came back.
We had our first child in Germany.
Mm-hmm, we did. And I certainly don't have any regrets. I do know that I could live away from Ashland, because we did live away and we survived and did fine.
Actually, it was great. You want to move back there again when I retire?
No, I have too many ties here
okay.
to do that. But it has been a wonderful place to raise our children, and for us to be raised, to be reared here.
You mentioned that he was in the Army and you were stationed in Germany. What exactly did you do in Germany in the Army?
Well, in the Army, there are lots of different jobs that officers and enlisted people have. In my job, I was called what they call a combat engineer, and does different things for the Army. And I was a company commander for a while, and I was a platoon leader for a while. In first a maintenance company. I don't know how I ended up in a maintenance company, but I did, and then I got into a combat engineer company, and I was a company commander there. That's a person who's in charge of a unit, I guess probably 150 soldiers and various things. So that's what I did there, and then we came back I had 30 days leave before I went to Vietnam, and she lived with her parents here in Ashland with our son while I went to Vietnam for a year, again as a combat engineer over there, company commander. And when I got back from that, I decided to get out of the Army, and I think that's when we really decided that you liked it here. You'd been here when your parents were here, and my parents were here, and everybody was here, and we liked it, and it was a good place, so we just stayed from there.
It was really nice. We had free babysitters. I think we liked that a lot. And then he's actually being really modest. He then went to law school after he got out of the Army, and but he was with the Army Reserve first, and then he was asked to join the National Guard, move over from the Army Reserve to the National Guard, and he retired from that about 5-6 years ago as a general. But in the meantime, I guess it was 1991, he was called up for Desert Storm. So he saw some real important, I think, sounded like the movies to me, things that you would read about or certainly see in a movie. So he's had a lot of good service with the Army. Oh, and he did win a National Patriot of the Year award after Desert Storm. Wasn't that after Desert Storm?
After the American Revolution, yeah. Mm-hmm. After Desert Storm, yeah.
Wow, so do you have any interesting war stories?
No, I don't want to tell war stories. No, I commanded a brigade of combat engineers over in Desert Storm, and that's a much larger size unit, and we had 3 active Army battalions. And I will say that some of the troops under my command, some of the troops under my command were some of the first troops into Iraq when the 7th Armored Corps invaded Iraq. So we're having some fun.
But I think.
But that wasn't a very serious war. I mean, the Republican Guard was the best thing they had, and apparently it wasn't much. So it wasn't all that bad in terms of a war. But we didn't know that, of course, until after. We worried about a lot of things, particularly gas. We thought we were going to get gassed, because he was supposed to have chemical weapons and all that sort of stuff. So it was a lot of sweating and straining and worry and work to get ready for the invasion. But then, it only lasted like 100 hours, so we were lucky. But it was exciting. I will have to say that. It was definitely exciting.
I was just going to say those 2 experiences were so very different for both of us. The Vietnam War, by the time he went, was so unpopular that when he came home from Vietnam, and of course, we know people who didn't come home from that war, there was no welcome home outside of your family because it was such an unpopular war. But then when he came back from Desert Storm, there was just this groundswell of people who were supportive, and people were sending care packages, to him and his troops. And when he came back, there was a big banner, welcoming him back, and lots of decorations and a lot of symbols of patriotism among the townspeople. So it was quite the opposite of a homecoming from Vietnam. So.
Okay. Do you have any other stories about Ashland, your growing up, or outside of Ashland that would pertain to Ashland?
Well, since this is the 150th anniversary of the town, I think we are, thinking about things that happened in the town. You got to give me a second. Let me think about what I would respond to.
Investigating all this history because she's a chairman of the committee at church. But
And I serve on the town steering committee for the 150th anniversary too, and a lot of interesting and wonderful things are coming out of just looking back at the history of Ashland and celebrating, 150 years here. It's quite different though. I think we said maybe in the earlier part of this interview how we, just went out and played, didn't lock doors, didn't. Everybody looked out for everybody else. It's different now. It's very different. The town has grown. I meet new people almost every day. And I think they're brand new to town, and they may have been here 10 or 15 years. When there was a time that you thought you really knew just about, or knew of just about everyone, who lived here. So the little community is not as static as it used to be, and it continues to grow. And actually, I think this is an interesting story. With passenger trains coming through Ashland, there are people in Ashland who are living here now, who are residents of Ashland, because when they came through on the train, it just looked like such an idyllic place to live that they moved. They picked up from wherever they were and they moved here because it looks like a little town you read about in a novel. That it's a pretty little town. It'd be a nice place to rear your children, bring up your family, and good place to live. And it is that. It has been that.
So you would never move out of Ashland?
I wouldn't say that. No, I might.
Wow.
We have a daughter. We have two children, a son and a daughter. Our son lives about 15 minutes from here, still in Hanover County. But our daughter lives in Florida. So we go to Florida, 5-6 times a year. I think we know we could exist outside of Ashland, but it is a nice place to be.
I can't think of anything else to